Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto fight like Minato during the Chunin exam part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It was too late, the damage had already been done. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, waited for the chakra dome, made of the chakra chains that Kushina created due to her being an Uzumaki, to disappear before he made his way to the altar. The bodies of both Minato and Kushina laid there, lifeless and covered in blood. The only thing that was left from their struggle with the Kyuubi was Minato and Kushina's newly born child, Naruto. The elderly man tenderly held the boy in his arms, slowly rocking the infant back and forth in hopes to stop his crying. Lord Fourth chose his own son to be the vessel. One of the Anbu asked in confusion. Sarutobi nodded sadly. Minato knew no one else would be able to survive the sealing of the fox, only an infant has the innocence to handle such a horrible act. What do we do now, Lord Hokage? A high-ranking Chunin questioned in solemn. The village is in ruins and without Lord Fourth guiding us, what will happen now? The now unretired Hokage thought in silence while cradling the infant blonde in his arms. The will of fire will not burn out from this one tragedy, we will recover. But, for now, I must tend young Naruto here. You're going to deal with a mere child before the village. The Chunin questioned again, sounding harsher than he intended. This child is a hero, without him none of us would be here right now. You will give him the respect he deserves. Sarutobi shot back. The Chunin lowered his head and decided to not speak anymore, out of fear of angering the Hokage even more. My lord, an Anbu spoke up, I do not disagree that this child is a hero, but my hunch is that the village will not see it as you do. The older man raised his brow. Elaborate crow. The village citizens just witnessed the worst attack to ever hit the village, not even lords first and second had to deal with such a tragedy. Many loved ones were killed by the demon that now lives inside that boy, they will blame him if they find out. Hiruzen lowered his eyes in deep thought. Crow did have a valid point. The amount of lives lost were already in the mid-hundreds and increasing at a current rate. He wished he could say that most of the villagers would see that Naruto was a hero for being the Kyuubi's container, but the older man knew better. Once word would get out that Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, his life would be in great danger. Not to mention Minato's enemies, Sarutobi was all but certain that they would stop at nothing to take revenge on Minato by killing his infant son. Feeling the greatest amount of guilt in his life, the third Hokage nodded sadly once more. I wish I could disagree with you, Crow, but I know you have a point. Naruto will be their scapegoat for their anger. The Anbu operative nodded. What do you want to do with him then, my lord? We'll keep his existence out of public knowledge for the time being, at least until I figure out a plan to protect the boy. In the meantime, I'll keep him in my office, so I can watch over him personally. A few days passed since the attack and things went from bad to worse. Not only did Naruto being the container for the Kyuubi leak out into the public, but the blame for the attack itself was being placed on the prestigious Uchiha clan, which already had draining relations with Konoha higher-ups. Sarutobi was aware of the fact that Danzo Shimura ordered the Uchiha clan to focus solely on defending the villagers. This was starting to cause a bigger rift between the clan and village. The third Hokage was already dealing with the Uchiha problem and had a plan in the works to help their relationship, but the man's main concern was Naruto's safety. Sarutobi blew smoke out of his mouth and placed his pipe on his desk, listening to the infant child softly sleep in his makeshift crib next to Sarutobi's desk. He wasn't sure if his plan for Naruto was certainly the best, but it was the only one that had ghost of a chance to give the boy somewhat of a normal life growing up. Granted, the man the Hokage wanted to have watch over Naruto wasn't considered normal by most people, but having the boy's godfather look after him seemed like a good idea. There was a knock at the Hokage's door. Sarutobi briefly thought that Jiraiya had arrived but quickly dismissed that thought. He would be notified by gate patrol when the Sannin would enter the village. Also, Jiraiya would probably enter through the window and not the door. Enter. Someone the Hokage should have been expecting to see, but seeing Makoto Uchiha walk in with her own infant son, Sasuke, and 6-year-old, Itachi, did surprise the elder Hokage. The man didn't need to ask why the wife Fugaku, the head of both the Uchiha clan and Konoha's military police force, was in his office. He knew that she was very close friends with Kushina. Lord Hokage, Makoto quietly gasped. The man was in worse condition than she had originally thought. His arms were completely bandaged, and he was covered in bruises and burns. Do not concern yourself with my injuries, Makoto, I will be all right. The black-haired Uchiha woman nodded slightly. I'm sorry to hear about your wife. Sarutobi did not say anything in response. He just nodded and let Makoto do what she had come here to do. Makoto placed Sasuke in Itachi's arms and scooped Naruto in her own. She smiled softly at the 3 whisker-like birthmarks on the child's face. Makoto's smile didn't last for very long. She knew what the villagers were saying about Naruto, and the Uchiha clan in extension. What are you going to do with him? I've sent word to Jiraiya to return home. I will try and convince him to take care of Naruto until this catastrophe is behind us and give the villagers a chance to calm down. A chance to see Naruto as the hero Minato wanted him to be. Makoto placed the infant Naruto back in his crib and looked back at the Hokage. You're sending him away with Lord Jiraiya. Is that really the best decision? Lord Jiraiya is very well known to attract some unwelcomed individuals. Sarutobi chuckled dryly at that. I'm well aware, but I'm confident that Naruto's godfather will take up the responsibility. Godfather? Yes. Jiraiya is Naruto's godfather. I'm actually surprised you didn't know that, being how close you and Kushina were. I didn't get to see her much in her last trimester. When I saw her last week, it was the first time in 2 months. Her pregnancy was a SS rank secret, Makoto. Not even the council members knew Kushina was pregnant. Hell, I wasn't made fully aware of it until a few months ago. I think the only people who knew what was going on from the beginning were you and Jiraiya, and that's only because of how close you two were to Minato and Kushina. But do you really think sending Naruto off with Lord Jiraiya is the smartest decision? He has a lot of enemies that would love to get their hands on the 9-tailed fox, and the 4th Hokage's son. I've already come up with a plan for that. The two were drawn to the window to see the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya, hopping into the office through the left open window. While Sarutobi was not shocked to see his student, he was concerned by the fact he was supposed to be alerted by one of the guards that the Sannin had arrived. The elder man just figured Jiraiya used his amazing stealth skills to enter the village walls. The white-haired man walked over to the makeshift crib. He softly smiled at the sleeping infant. You look just like your father. He whispered tenderly. The tone in the room suddenly turned serious. Jiraiya, I am requesting that you don't need to ask, sensei. When I got your scroll, I knew what I had to do. I will take the boy and watch over him. Minato asked me to be Naruto's godfather because he had faith in me to help raise him. I will not bow out from this promise. Sarutobi smiled. He knew Jiraiya would step up. If only his other student would return from her downward spiral and see that the village needs its Sannin back. The 3rd Hokage inwardly sighed at the thought of his female student in her current state. It seems Tsunade had cut off the rest of the world and is continually trying to drown her sorrow in sake and gambling. Sarutobi has tried to reach out to the world-class medic, but unfortunately, he could not reason with Tsunade. There was also the matter of finding the woman. Tsunade, somehow, was not the easiest person to find these days. Master Jiraiya, Makoto spoke up, if you don't mind me asking, what is your plan regarding Naruto? No. The 3rd Hokage suddenly stated. The less any of us know, the better for Naruto. Somehow, word has gotten out that he is the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. I'm looking into the leak, but, as of right now, We cannot risk Naruto's safety if Jiraiya's plan were leak out into the public as well. Makoto wasn't happy to hear this, and apparently Sasuke wasn't either. He started to cry in Itachi's arms. The young boy, who was already considered a genius, did what he could to try and calm his younger brother, but Makoto knew her newborn was starting to get hungry. They would need to return home soon. Very well, she sighed, taking Sasuke into her arms. I came here with the intentions of convincing you to let me raise Naruto, but it seems your mind's set on letting Lord Jiraiya watch over him. Makoto, Sarutobi started, if the situation were different, I'd love nothing more than to let Naruto be raised by you. But the Uchiha clan is being blamed for unleashing the Kyuubi on the village. As ridiculous as that sounds, the image of your clan would be tarnished completely even more if the villagers saw him within the Uchiha compound. Then there is the issue with the investigation. Makoto decided it best to keep her comments to herself, knowing they would lead to an argument that was not her place to have without her husband and her children present. Itachi was too young to know what about the Uchiha clan had been accused of doing, though Makoto knew her older son was sharper than most adults despite his young age. Please, take care of him. Makoto took hold of Itachi's hand and left the office. Sarutobi shook his head and took another hit off his pipe. Makoto may not be a firecracker like Kushina, but one all in the same. Jiraiya felt no need to respond. Makoto was the silent type that you never wanted to piss off. He could only recall ever hearing of Makoto losing her temper once, and Fugaku, who was considered on par with Minato to be named the fourth Hokage and gained his own nickname, Wicked Eye, during the Third Great Shinobi War, cowered away from his wife. He thanked Kami that he never felt that woman's anger, but Tsunade's was probably just as bad and probably worse. The legendary Sannin took his godson into his arms and held him somewhat awkwardly. Admittedly, this was the first time he had ever held a baby and he had no clue what to do. He remembered something that Tsunade told him once about making sure the head is held properly. He wasn't why they were talking about babies. He dismissed his confusion by thinking it probably had something to do with Dan, her former lover, fiancé. Jiraiya was about to leave but stopped when he noticed the monotone expression on his teacher's face. It wasn't often that Sarutobi would show this expression. He knew the old man was deeply worried for Naruto and his future, and leaving it up to him was probably not the easiest thing for the old man to let happen. It wasn't because Sarutobi didn't trust Jiraiya, it was just Sarutobi felt like he owed Minato for saving the village. Raising and training his son seemed like a good way to repay that debt. I'll send updates, sensei. I know Jiraiya, I know. The third Hokage sighed. Just don't keep him away forever. I want him to go through the academy at some point. Jiraiya chuckled. This kid is going to be a powerhouse when he grows up. I just hope he got his father's brains and not just his looks. As do I. Sarutobi softly laughed. 6 quick years has passed since the Kyuubi attacked the village. Konoha recovered completely from the horrible attack architecturally, but from the political standpoint things could not be any worse. The already tense relations with the Uchiha clan fell through broken glass when the council made the rash decision to move the Uchiha compound to the far edge of the village, practically isolating them from the entire village. Somehow things were made even worse when Itachi, the young genius prodigy of the Uchiha clan, joined the ranks of the Anbu Black Ops. While that was something that entire Shinobi Council predicted when the boy showed the signs of being the genius he was becoming, Sarutobi felt an oddity with Itachi's sudden jump into the Anbu ranks. Itachi never expressed any want to be in Anbu, the young boy was a pacifist. Sarutobi chose to look into the matter by calling Itachi into his office. The third Hokage questioned the Uchiha prodigy about his reasons for his sudden interest in an Anbu life. Itachi didn't say much other than he wants to save the village and the Uchiha clan, but he knew only one could come out on top. Sarutobi had a sinking feeling that the Uchiha were planning something, and his talk with Itachi just confirmed it. When Sarutobi questioned if the Uchiha were planning, Itachi told everything about coup d'etat his father and the other Uchiha higher-ups were working on. And how him joining Anbu was to be a double agent to try and achieve peace between the two, and his best friend, Shisui, was doing the same but on the regular shinobi level. And on top of it all, there hadn't been any updates on Naruto and how his is growing up from Jiraiya. The only update the perverted Sannin had sent was a few months after Jiraiya had taken him out of the village and left him with the sage toads, Lord Fukasaku and Lady Shima, while he checked his spy network for anything that could be taken as a threat towards Konoha. Other than that, Jiraiya kept Naruto with him as he moved around the world. Thankfully, there was nothing from the other nations and showed no indication of even knowing about the Kyuubi's attack to begin with. There was always one silver lining in an overall bad situation. Still, Sarutobi was worried about Naruto and growing up without much interaction children his age, or even people in general. There was a knock that tore the third Hokage from his deep thoughts. Enter. The legendary Toad Sage himself walked through the door. Long time no see, sensei. Jiraiya. Sarutobi looked beyond his longtime student. Is Naruto with you? Jiraiya chuckled. He is, but he saw the Ichiraku ramen shop and couldn't help himself. This is the first time he's been inside the village since his birth. How does he know about Ichiraku ramen? Lady Shima decided bugs and insects weren't the best diet for a growing boy. Whenever she would come to the village for indigents, she would pick up some instant ramen for Naruto as a treat for completing his training. Or not causing me too much trouble out on the road. The toads have taken a liking to him, I take it. Of course, he is Minato's son after all. You mentioned training. Jiraiya smiled. Naruto is a natural-born ninja, everything comes to him with ease. We've only taught him what he'd learned through the academy, but it's a breeze for him. The man's smile suddenly disappeared. Though, that's only because he found my book. He reached into his green kimono and pulled out the very book the white-haired man was talking about. Sarutobi was glad to see that it wasn't the famous Ika Tactics perverted book that Jiraiya had written, but the man's very first book he had ever written, The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. Sarutobi had to think for a moment about why this book was the reason for Naruto being a natural. It clicked in the old man's brain. He learned about his name. Near the village center, down the main road that led through Konoha, the villagers' lives were going on as per usual. Everything was turning out to be another normal day. One of the many shops on that main drag was rather popular ramen restaurant. Ichiraku Ramen read the entrance kanji signs that acted as the door that came down to that of an average-heighted person's waist. Sitting at one of the many stools was a young boy, maybe 5 or 6, with spiky blonde hair and 3 distinctive whisker birthmarks on each of his cheeks. He was wearing a black short-sleeved shirt with red swirl on his chest, a pair of white, almost gray, shorts and dark blue ninja sandals. Naruto was in heaven as he drank the last of the ramen-flavored water out of the bowl, finishing off his 4th bowl. He knew Ero Sennin wanted him to go see the old man with him, but he just couldn't help himself when they walked past the ramen shop. Though, Naruto was a little surprised Jiraiya didn't come after him when he ran off, or even decide to come in and join him for a bowl. The young blonde didn't have to think very hard why his master, and caretaker, didn't follow him. It was probably because of that. He mentally shook his head at the memory. Why would they keep something like this from him? What was the purpose? To protect him. From what? Grandpa Sage did, accidentally, tell him once that the villagers probably wouldn't very welcome towards him whenever he would return to the village. When Naruto questioned what the elder toad meant by that, Jiraiya appeared suddenly and stopped Fukasaku before the toad could say any more. Then, a month or so later, Naruto found that book when Shima tasked him to clean up around him and Jiraiya's room she kept for them whenever they returned to the toad's hidden village in the mountains. It was completely accidental that Naruto even found the book. He was simply moving around a few objects on the perv's shelf when it suddenly fell out of its hiding spot. Naruto was very intrigued by the book's title, The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, and instantly rushed off to a hiding spot to read it. To say he loved the book was understatement. Everything from the plot to the character development of the minor characters was masterful in the young boy's mind. Even though Naruto loved the book, there was one glaring problem that he couldn't overlook. The main character's name was his very own. He wanted to go and find Jiraiya to question him about it when he first saw his name written in the book, but felt he should finish the book first. Maybe his questions would be answered if he did. When Naruto closed the book when finished with the masterpiece, it did not take him long to find the legendary Sannin. "Hey kid, you full yet or you want another bowl?" asked the owner, cook. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts and looked up from his empty bowl. Honestly, Naruto knew he could put another 3 bowls away before deciding it was enough, but he lost his appetite when he started thinking about everything that had happened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out as much Ryo as he had, which wasn't much. "Will this be enough?" The man chuckled. "Sure kid." He took the small amount of money from the boy and watched him leave his restaurant. He placed the money in the tip jar he kept at the end of the counter, knowing there was no point in putting the small amount in the register. "You do realize that kid's severely underpaid, right Tuki?" one of few customers pointed out. "Oh, I know," Tuki answered with a half smile. "Then why'd you let him leave?" "I noticed something about him. The way he was sitting there thinking, not many kids his age looks longingly like that. I felt like he needed to catch a break for once." Naruto looked around the large-scale village in awe as he exited the ramen shop. Jiraiya had told him stories of how great this village was and how it was the strongest in all the 5 great shinobi nations. But to finally see it in person was far better than hearing about it. He looked toward the large mountain with the faces of the 4 Hokage carved into the side of it, knowing the old man's office was directly below it. The stories, not only Jiraiya had told him but Fukasaku had told him about all the Hokages were legendary. From Lord First's battle with the great Madara Uchiha to Lord Second's last stand against the Kumo Death Squad to save his team, that included the 3rd Hokage who was already considered a god of shinobi at the point of his inauguration. Then there was him, the 4th Hokage. Naruto still didn't know the full story of the late, great 4th Hokage, assuming there was one to know like the rest of the Hokage. Lord Fourth's legend was something different from the other 3 Hokages, not that the other Hokages were lacking in feats, but there's something different about the man known as the Yellow Flash. Not only did the 4th Hokage single-handedly turn the tide and win the 3rd Great Shinobi War with his improved version of the Hiraishin, a time-space ninjutsu that allows instant teleportation to a previously placed special seal formula that was created by the 2nd Hokage, and his own invented jutsu the Rasengan, the 4th Hokage was the youngest Kage ever to be named. He was a mere 24 years old when he was named Hokage. Many considered him the mythical savior that the world needed to help stop the endless war that plagued it, so said Jiraiya anyway. But when he suddenly died fighting against the Kyuubi, something didn't sit right with Naruto. Fukasaku taught him the basics of sealing techniques and how they work. It was a dying concept among active ninja and Naruto seemed to grasp the idea well. Despite his young age, and it was almost obvious that the Kyuubi wasn't a normal being, considering the fact that it nearly leveled Konoha completely with one attack. So, it bothered Naruto when he was told that the Kyuubi was simply killed by the 4th Hokage in his final breath. Naruto had a hunch that a being like the Kyuubi couldn't just be killed like that. It would make more sense to seal that beast away into something, or someone. As Naruto made his way through the village, towards the Hokage Tower, he began to notice and hear murmurs and whispers of the villagers he walked past. Those whiskers. Is he the one? That's gotta be him. Naruto turned his focus away from what was in front of him and tried to listen more on what was being said around him, until he ran into something that knocked him on his back and hitting his head on the ground. The young blonde rubbed the back of his head and opened his eyes to see what he ran into too. Naruto was shocked to see a ninja standing before him, a high-ranking one at that. "I'm sorry mister, I wasn't watching where I was going." Naruto stopped when he saw the man's hateful glare to him. "It is you. The demon." Naruto's eyes widened considerably. Demon. What do you mean? The young boy quivered. Villagers began to surround the young boy like a large pack of wolves, harboring their own hateful glares that fell on terrified young boy. It wasn't long before a large mass of people had formed around Naruto and the ninja that he had bumped into. Soon the villagers began to shout and scream like a mob, all words of hate directed towards young Naruto. Beginning to fear for his own life, Naruto ran and fought through the growing mob of people in hopes of finding safety. He was cut, kicked, punched, spit on, and screamed like a leper. It took most of the young boy's strength to fight his way out, but he managed to do so. He didn't even bother trying to find Jiraiya. He wasn't familiar with the village enough to find another route to the Hokage's office. So, Naruto picked the clearest way and ran for his young life. Whether it be a stroke of luck or an act of God, Naruto was somehow able to lose the mob that was chasing him like hungry wolves. He sprinted through an alleyway, ran through a couple open houses, and hid under a red bridge that ran over a medium-sized pond. He breathed heavily as he tried to nurse his deep cuts and already tender bruises. The salt from his tears burned his cuts. What did I do? He sobbed, trying to handle the pain of his injuries. Why did he call me a demon? Naruto didn't try to hide or calm his sobs, he was in too much pain to do so. It may have been quiet enough to ignore but not quiet enough to attract someone. He sobbed into his knees, hiding his face from the world and hoping no one would find. Hey, are you okay? The young boy physically flinched. Someone had spoken to him. He must have been crying too hard to notice someone come near him. He removed his head from his knees and looked at the person. It was a young girl, probably his same age, with bright short pink hair and a red ribbon tied into it. Her jade green eyes weren't filled with much concern, more curiosity than anything else for someone her age. The young girl saw the boy flinch when she spoke. It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. She heard the boy sobbing underneath the bridge when she was walking over it, trying to catch up to her parents because she wanted to pick a few of her favorite flowers, yellow lilies. My name is Sakura. What's yours? Naruto sniffled. Naruto Uzumaki. He noticed the flowers in the young girl's hands. Why do you have those flowers? I was walking with my mom and dad and I saw a small patch of them. They're my favorite kind of flower. She took one of the many she had and handed it over to Naruto. Here. Naruto was stunned. For me. Sakura smiled and nodded. You look like you need a pick-me-up. Why are you all beat up? Naruto sniffled again, his tears finally starting to subside. His eyes went downcast. The villa. Sakura. Where are you? I'm down here, Mom. Sakura. What on earth are you doing under here? The dark blonde woman's voice trailed off when she saw the boy next to her daughter. Sakura. Get over here now. Sakura was confused. It was rare for her mother to use this kind of tone of voice. Mom. Right now, young lady. Not wanting to feel her mother's wrath, Sakura rushed to her mother's side without a second thought. Sakura's mother quickly grabbed a hold of Sakura's small hand and took her away from the cut and bruised blonde boy. Sakura was surprised by the sudden jerk from her mother that she dropped the flowers she had picked. My flowers. Naruto barely had any time to try and say something to ask why before he heard another yelling of the mob that he had just gotten away from. He struggled to his feet and began to run once more. He ran as fast as he could, but his injuries and straight exhaustion were too much for the young boy. He made it only so far before he collapsed in the middle of the street. The mob of enraged villagers wasn't too far behind. Naruto could see the mob that had been chasing him. Then everything went black. A giant beast stirred behind a massive red gate which was held shut by nothing more than a simple piece of tan paper with the kanji for seal written in black. The large animal had been patiently waiting for the blonde-haired boy to wake from his sleep. The animal didn't understand how the young boy could sleep in a foot of water without waking up. Finally, the boy was starting to wake up because he was splashing out of shock. Naruto coughed up a little bit of water as he abruptly sat up in the water. He First, gathered his breathing before taking in his new surroundings. He was in a gloomily lit area that had piping trailing along the ceiling, combined with the foot of water he was sitting in, gave Naruto the impression that he was in some sort of sewer. There wasn't much he could see in front of him. It surprised him to see that he was walking down a large, long hallway that came to a giant gate. Curiosity had Naruto as he looked over the gate, noting that the only thing that was keeping it closed was a simple piece of paper. He was moving closer to see if anything was inside the enormous cell but stopped when a booming voice echoed throughout the place. "Hello, Kit." As would any normal 6-year-old kid, Naruto was frightened and stumbled on shaky legs until he tripped over himself and fell back on his rear end. Using what nerve the young boy could muster up, Naruto shakily spoke up. "Who's there?" The answer was quick. "Do not be afraid of me, Kit, please. I'm not going to harm you." Naruto swallowed down his fear as much as he could, something that was easy to do for someone his age, as he waited for the deep voice to continue. He was young, yes, but that didn't mean he was stupid enough to trust this thing. Jiraiya had taught him better. "I know you have some questions and I'll cover the most obvious ones right now, but if you have any more then I'll gladly answer them for you." Naruto was still scared, but nothing was harming him right now. He was glad for that right now. There were no villagers or anything in sight. So, he figured he would let this thing speak, then he'd ask a question or two when it was done. "This place is, well, the easiest way I can put this is we're inside your mind. How you got here is relatively the same. You were just beaten to a pulp and, naturally, this is where you will go when you lose consciousness." Naruto watched the darkness that covered the inside of the cell as he waited for the deep, booming voice to speak again. "Okay, but what are you? Who are you? And how do I know you won't hurt me?" The young boy quivered. There was a rather loud sigh before the voice responded to his question. "Well, I know you've heard of the Kyuubi no Yoko, or better known as, the nine-tailed fox. So, your hunch was correct about the fourth Hokage." Naruto stared blankly into the darkness, taking in the words that the Kyuubi had just told him. The fox was thoroughly surprised that the young boy didn't freak out. He seemed to be taking it well. At least, that was before the words finally set in. "Why, you mean that the fourth Hokage sealed the Kyuubi inside me?" The Kyuubi once again, inwardly, sighed as he nodded, though Naruto couldn't see it. "Yes, he did. But there was. Then there's no way you won't kill me." Naruto curled up into the fetal position as he began to sob in fear. The nine-tailed fox didn't answer for a short period of time as he listened to the faint crying of the 6-year-old blonde boy that sat just beyond his prison cell. "Kit, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. Not only do I not want to, but if I kill you then I kill myself. So please, don't be afraid of me." The crying slowly dwindled until there was only a few sniffles of a runny nose. The young boy was beginning to understand that the beast meant no ill intent towards him. He rubbed his face clean of any tears and snot that fell from his running nose. "So, why did Lord Fourth choose me?" "Well, why he chose you is a story for a different time. I'm not sure why those fucks you call leaders decided to keep you hidden away with that perverted man. Honestly, I think they made your situation worse because they sent you away." "What do you mean?" This village had been relatively untouched since its creation by the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha. There hasn't been a major conflict near the village walls since then. So, the current generation of villagers have never seen power like I possess. They fear it, loathe it, and utterly hate me for killing their loved ones. I do not blame them for hating me, but it is wrong to take out their fear-induced rage on you. I'm positive with you being gone with that pervert, the villagers had calmed but not forgotten. Seeing you for the first time in 6 years reignited their anger. So, they chased and hurt me because they fear me. Well, you aren't completely wrong, but their fear is more placed on me than you, Kit. The basics of how sealing jutsus are no longer taught in your academy, haven't been in decades. That pervert you call a caretaker is the last known Fuinjutsu master, and even he hasn't tapped into the full potential of sealing. Hell, the fourth Hokage was considered better than the Sannin and he still had room for improvement. But he sealed you away inside me, that's pretty impressive. Naruto quipped, causing the fox to groan in annoyance. Be quiet, Kit. Being a newborn, your chakra coils weren't fully developed, which made sealing me inside of you 100 times easier. If anyone else was in your place, then I would still be free. Naruto suddenly went downcast at the Kyuubi's last comment. If anyone else was in my place, so it was pure coincidence that you were sealed in me. Kyuubi knew if he didn't word this right then he could really screw this kid up more than he already was. The beast still couldn't understand why that stupid third Hokage was keeping so many secrets from the boy. He was starting to put some of the pieces together with the discovery of where his name had come from, but things could possibly turn badly if that damn cage didn't man up soon. Or that perverted Sannin. Both of them could turn this kid into their worst nightmare if they fuck it up. Life isn't fair, Kit. Sometimes shit happens that is out of your control and you just must roll with the punches. But you must understand that the fourth Hokage was trying to make you a hero. The village, however, didn't see you the way he, or the third, wanted. Don't be angry with him, he was doing what he thought was best for the village. If it wasn't for you then the village would have been destroyed and you wouldn't even exist right now. Naruto nodded understandingly as he looked back through the gate. He was surprised by the Kyuubi and why he was taking the time to just talk to him. From the stories that Jiraiya had told him, the fox demon was full of hate and wouldn't hesitate to kill whoever simply annoyed him. Why are you telling me all this? If Naruto could see the demon's features, he would see a soft, compassion half-smirk. Your life as a Jinchuriki will never be normal, Kit. I know you've hadn't had the stability of staying in one place for long, life will not be easy for you. You know, despite your young age, that the world is not pretty. You may have had a caretaker in the Sannin, but the pain of not knowing who your real parents are is something not many understand. Hell, life in this village will be difficult on its own because the people hate you for a decision that was far out of your control. I want you to be a great ninja so this ignorant village to see just how wrong they are about you. Naruto could only think about how much he wanted that to be the case as his vision of the gate and environment quickly started to blur, then everything went black. Good luck, Kit. Jiraiya had not left Naruto's hospital room since he had brought him in the day before. There were two reasons why he had stayed and not gone out on a rage-filled rampage against the villagers. The first was to watch over him and make sure his condition didn't worsen. Fear had overtaken him that if he left the boy would die. The second reason was to protect Naruto from those who wished the young boy harm. The Sannin knew that Sarutobi had assigned Anbu to watch over the room and only allow a trusted doctor, himself, or Jiraiya into the room. Currently, the Toad Sannin was staring out the lone window in the room as he dealt with the unmeasurable anger that coursed through his veins. Naruto had barely been in the village for a few hours and somehow been recognized as the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. The poor boy didn't even do anything to anger the villagers, they simply noticed who he was and attacked him. Jiraiya knew it was too early to bring him back, the villagers still held that grudge against Kyuubi for taking their family members away from them. Though Jiraiya's anger wasn't solely placed on the villagers, he held some anger towards his sensei as well. And Anbu, who was Minato's sole surviving student Kakashi Hatake, burst into the Hokage's office, informing them of what was happening with Naruto. Jiraiya rushed to the blonde boy's side. He had to literally throw a villager off Naruto before he could take Naruto to the hospital. Once there, medical personnel did what they could for the boy, which wasn't much by what Jiraiya saw them do. Sarutobi finally showed up a few hours later. The silence between the two was short-lived before the third Hokage dropped the bomb on him. I have a mission for you, Jiraiya. Jiraiya kept his mouth shut throughout the entire briefing. A team of Anbu had gone missing after reporting a sighting of a mysterious masked man. No further reports followed. Sarutobi believed they had been killed and wanted his trusted spy master to investigate their disappearance. The old man said it would only take a couple of weeks, a month at most, and that Naruto could stay with him until Jiraiya returned. But the Sannin knew better. A mission like this would take, at the very least, 6 months. Honestly, there was no telling how long this mission would take because there hadn't been anything on a masked man coming from his contacts in his spy network. He would have to start from scratch. Sarutobi said he had a choice to take the mission or not. What the Hokage really meant was that Jiraiya had the choice to either wait until Naruto woke up to leave or leave now and save the trouble of telling why Jiraiya had left him here up to Sarutobi and the elders. The Sannin really couldn't see which choice was worse. He thought about his decision thoroughly, knowing the longer he took here the more time this masked man would have to disappear into the world. This wouldn't be the first time Jiraiya would just suddenly leave without as so much as a goodbye, but Naruto was with the Toads when he wasn't with him out in the world. Jiraiya didn't see this as the best choice but the quickest and easiest, not to mention cowardly. Jiraiya took one long look at his godson, knowing this would be the last time he'd be seeing him for some time, before opening the window and jumping out, leaving the still unconscious boy. Naruto awoke some time after his Jiraiya left. He was surprised to see that he was mostly healed from his injuries. He was a little sore, but it was nothing the young boy couldn't handle. Naruto waited patiently for his caretaker to come visit him, but the man never came. Not even the third Hokage showed his face. Naruto waited for hours for 2 men that would never come. There was a knock at the door and a man with silver hair that seemed to defy gravity with a fox mask that covered his face entered the room. Naruto instantly figured out that this guy was a member of the Anbu Black Ops. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto did his best to keep his composure, but the Anbu still could see the fear and distrust in the young boy's eyes, and the man didn't blame the child one bit. Why yes. Lord Hokage wants to see you. I'll take you to him. Naruto followed the Anbu through the streets of the village to the Hokage Tower, ignoring the glares of the villagers that were stopped when the masked Anbu shot them a glare of his own. Once the two made it to the tower, the Anbu led Naruto up the stairs and entered the office without even knocking. Sarutobi didn't even flinch when the two entered, just softly smiled. Thank you Kakashi, that'll be all for now. The Anbu bowed before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto stared at the elderly man with caution. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. This was the first time he had ever met the third Hokage. Jiraiya had told him a lot about this man, so already felt a closeness to the man, but meeting for the first time felt awkward. There is no need to be weary of me, Naruto. I'm here to help you. Help me with what? Where's Arrow Sennin? Naruto, please try to understand when I tell you this. Jiraiya has left the village. He what? Naruto quivered. Something came up and it couldn't wait to be taken care of. I apologize for Jiraiya because he couldn't wait for you wake up to say goodbye. The circumstances didn't allow him to linger around and waste time. Waste of time? Is that all I was to Arrow Sennin? Naruto lowered his head as the words set themselves deep inside Naruto's mind, almost as if the words themselves completely altered the boy's way of thinking the second they were said. He was now stuck in this village alone. It was a new feeling, but it felt so familiar to him. I see. I know you aren't a fan of this, Naruto. But Jiraiya has left you in my care until he returns. Also, I will be overseeing your training that you will be receiving along with the teachings of the academy. That sparked Naruto's interest. Academy. Of course. You want to be a great ninja, don't you? Naruto's mind snapped back to his conversation with the beast within him. A newfound determination surprised the third Hokage. Yes. I want to show this village how wrong they are about me. Sarutobi raised his eyebrow at the young boy's choice of words. What do you mean, Naruto? I promised someone I'd be the greatest ninja in the village. I don't intend to let him down. Sarutobi thought about the boy's words. Who was this mysterious person that challenged Naruto to become a great ninja? Was it Jiraiya? Did he leave something for Naruto before leaving on his mission? Or was it promised to himself just to prove the villagers wrong? Something must have happened after Jiraiya saved Naruto from the mob and brought him to the hospital. So Ojiazan, Naruto started, causing the elderly man to smirk, you mentioned that you'd be overseeing my training that I'll be doing outside of the academy. What kind of training did you have in mind? In due time, Naruto, we'll get to that soon enough. Sarutobi reached into his desk and pulled out 2 wristbands and unique scroll that had a padlock seal etched onto the paper, sealing the scroll shut. But here, this will be a good start for you. Naruto looked over the wristbands. What are these? Chakra weights. These are special training tools that help with making you stronger and faster. Naruto nodded as he glanced at the third once more. How do I use them? It's quite simple. All you have to do is pump chakra into them like you would when creating a bushin. The more chakra you put into the weights, the heavier they will be. If you put too much into the weights and it proves to be too much, just decrease the amount of chakra in them to the weight you want. So, essentially these chakra weights will also help with your chakra control. After Sarutobi was done explaining, the blonde looked down at the weights in his hands. He placed them around his ankles and pumped some chakra into them. He instantly felt the weight. Thank you, Ojiazan, these will help me big time. Naruto, you do realize those weights are made for your wrists and not your legs? Naruto nodded. I know that. I figured this would be a smarter thing to do for now. I want to work on my speed first, it'll help in the long run over strength. Sarutobi's eyes widened slightly. Jiraiya wasn't kidding when said Naruto is just as good as Minato when he was a child. He analyzed the pros and cons of using the weights and thought of whole new use for them. Impressive. So, what's the deal with that scroll? This another special tool, though it still needs perfecting. This is a chakra scroll. It was made to carry various items for traveling, battle, or simply storage. All you need to access this scroll is learn the jutsu that the scroll was sealed with. Once I teach it to you, you'll have access to the scrolls that I placed in there that I thought would be good baseline for you to start learning. What kind of scrolls are in there? A jutsu from every chakra nature and a scroll for the basics of chakra control. Once you are finished with the scrolls already in there, you can come back and take from my library of scrolls as you wish. Though I recommend finishing the you take before coming back to take more. Naruto nodded and beamed with excitement. He was ready to get started with this training. Sarutobi loved to see the enthusiasm in such a young boy. It's good to see so excited Naruto, but I'm afraid you can't start just yet. What? Why not? I enrolled you into the Ninja Academy and classes start tomorrow. I don't want you to be tired for your first day, seeing how you have a little bit of work ahead of you. What do you mean? Unfortunately, Naruto, I can't watch over you constantly like Jiraiya did. So, you will be living on your own in an apartment I've chosen for you. Here is the key and the money for the down payment and first few months of rent, plus expenses like food. Once you graduate from the academy and start taking on missions, you'll have to pay for it on your own. Naruto nodded once more, taking the envelope and key and placed them in his pocket. Now for the jutsu that will unseal that scroll. I'll show you how it's done. Naruto was pleasantly surprised when he unlocked the door to his new home. It wasn't anything special to look at, but it was plenty for a 6-year-old to live in by himself. The apartment was already furnished with bed, a small couch, a coffee and dining table set, a kitchen with a fridge and sink. Down the short hall was a small but simple full-sized bathroom. By normal apartment standards, this one was considered rundown and needed repairs. But Naruto didn't mind. He was used to moving around with Jiraiya for few months before returning to Mount Myoboku. Even then his room there was small and not very spacious. He thought about the toads that he had grown to know while in between trips with Jiraiya. They were always nice to him, never shunning him away. But they didn't really interact with him much. Naruto was mostly left alone while he stayed with them. The only toads that spent any time with him were the 2 toad elders, Lord Fukasaku and Lady Shima. Was I just a waste of time for them too? Just like for Ero Sennin. Naruto couldn't believe his caretaker, the man that had been watching over him for as long as he could remember, would just leave without so much as an explanation. Or even a goodbye. That's what really hurt Naruto. The fact that Jiraiya left while he was unconscious, and during a time when Naruto needed Jiraiya the most. I guess I can't depend on anyone, only myself. Naruto didn't see the point in sitting around and sulking about what had happened, that wasn't his style. He, instead, thought better to use his time to train. Naruto took out the scroll and placed on the table. He went through a series of hand signs and released the jutsu that was placed on the scroll. The third was impressed by how quickly Naruto took to Fuinjutsu, and Naruto was proud of that. The contents of the scroll appeared in a small cloud of smoke on the coffee table in front of his couch. Each scroll was labeled. There were Kaden, Fire, Suiden, Water, Doden, Earth, Fuden, Wind, and Raiden, Lightning, scrolls. All were D-rank level jutsus and were considered basics for each element. The sixth scroll was labeled for chakra control, again just the fundamentals. Naruto wanted to spread out the learning of these jutsus, but he was just too excited to do that. So, Naruto positioned his fingers into a cross-hand sign. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique. Instantly, 5 identical clones of the young boy popped into existence, each in their own plumes of smoke. Already knowing what to do, the clones each grabbed a scroll and spread themselves around the apartment to study the scroll they had chosen, while the original chose to study the chakra control scroll. Naruto was so happy that Jiraiya taught him this jutsu. The pervert knew it would be perfect for Naruto because of his abnormally massive chakra reserves. He remembered the Sannin saying once that Naruto easily had, at least, 4 times the amount of chakra that the third Hokage did, and he was considered to have the most in the entire village. There was a major difference between the regular clone jutsu and the shadow clone jutsu. The regular Bushin jutsu was more of a mirage to be used as a distraction in battle and to gather information on the enemy during a stealth mission. While the Kage Bushin was a solid copy of the creator that could actually fight in battle and gather information much easier. And when the clone would get dispelled, the memories of what the clone experienced would transfer themselves to the creator. The one downside to the Kage Bushin was that only memories were transferred. So, if the clones were used for training, like Naruto was intending to use them for, no physical changes would be done to Naruto once he dispelled the clone. Naruto was going to have to do all the physical training himself. He really didn't mind though. He almost preferred it like that. For the rest of the day, Naruto and his clones studied the scrolls until they fell asleep well into the night. Next day, Naruto rested his head on his right arm as he quietly sighed in disinterest as his academy instructor, Iruka Umino, rambled on about a history lesson of the creation of Konoha. He already knew this tale from Jiraiya. Iruka had already been talking for a few hours now and Naruto was ready to pass out from boredom. This is going to be a long 6 years. Naruto silently sighed to himself again. There was a 6-year minimum requirement to graduate from the academy, including passing the final graduation exam at the end of the 6 years. Though, Naruto didn't think it was all bad. He didn't notice when he first entered the classroom, mostly because the young spiky-haired boy woke up and rushed in, but there was a certain pink-haired girl that caught Naruto's attention when he quickly grew bored of Iruka's history lesson. Naruto thought about his quick interaction with her the other day, which was quickly cut short by her mother, and it dawned on him that couldn't say thank you for the flower, or even goodbye. He hoped Sakura didn't think he was ungrateful for the flower. It was his most prized possession. It sat in a small cup water on his window sill so that the flower could get enough sunlight. Naruto knew it wouldn't live long, but he decided to enjoy it as much as he could. Naruto was thrown from his daze when Iruka changed his tone and students began to rise from their seats. It was time for their 1-hour lunch break. Finally, Naruto sighed out loud as he followed his new classmates outside. Once outside, Naruto watched his classmates be greeted by their parents and loved ones who had brought them lunch for their first day. Seeing this caused Naruto to miss that perverted Sannin, but an anger rose as well. The only person to care for him simply left and there was nothing Naruto could do about it. He noticed a swing hidden by the shade of the tree it was hung on. He sat on the swing and watched the others eat their lunches, envious that he didn't have what they did. Time skip. 6 years. Naruto's eyes fluttered open as the morning sunlight shined through his curtain. He groaned in annoyance because the 12-year-old did not want to wake up, but his body would not allow him the luxury of falling back asleep, thus he began to move. He followed through with his morning routine that led him to the training grounds. That is where his day really began. Naruto would train for a few hours before going to his classes at the academy, that is if the blonde went at all. Otherwise Naruto would spend his whole day training. Ever since Naruto joined the academy, he considered himself a part-time student. Either because he already knew what Iruka would be teaching for that day, thanks to what he learned from Jiraiya before the Sannin suddenly left him, or because of the scrolls Naruto would take from the third Hokage's library of scrolls, or Naruto simply did not bother to go because he felt like he could teach himself better. On average, Naruto went to class 1 or 2 a week. And that's only because those days were set aside for sparring. Naruto even questioned himself why he would even participate in those sparring matches. He was easily much stronger than all his classmates in all forms of combat. The only one that could come close to Naruto was Sasuke Uchiha. The Uchiha was considered the front runner for the Rookie of the Year award because he was at the top of every list. The black-haired boy had the best scores for shuriken and kunai throws, near-perfect ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu scores. The only category that Sasuke wasn't placed first in was IQ. That title went to Shikamaru Nara, followed up by Sakura Haruno. Sasuke was placed fourth behind Shino Aburame. If Naruto had attended class regularly, then he'd be at the top of every list, minus IQ because Shikamaru had scored over a 200 on that test. Naruto was smarter than your average kid but nowhere near what Shikamaru was at. But Naruto had to attend class today. It was graduation day. Today's the day, he inwardly sighed as he went through his morning stretches. This is gonna be a total waste of my time, but it is required. Naruto thought back to the other day when the Hokage called him into his office to give him the test requirements because Sarutobi knew Naruto did not attend the class that Iruka taught. Can you even call this an exam? A simple shuriken and kunai throw and a genjutsu on the instructor. How does that gauge a ninja's battle readiness? Or even if they can handle a fight against an enemy shinobi? Naruto, though he didn't want to, took this morning's training session easy. He felt like he should just in case he accidentally hurt himself before the exam. Not like it would really matter. Naruto would just suffer through whatever injury he sustained or it would be quickly healed by the Kyuubi. Despite the village hating Naruto for being the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, being its host did have a few perks. His chakra levels were far beyond anyone else's in the village, a healing factor that Sandaime compared to that of the Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and the ability to have heightened senses, like enhanced hearing and sense of smell. And for a being that is made up of entirely chakra and hate, the Kyuubi did have his soft moments towards the young blonde. Yes, the nine-tailed fox could be a royal asshole, and he was most of the time, but the Kyuubi would help Naruto from time to time with his training. If Naruto would swallow his pride and ask for it. Naruto sighed to himself again. It was time to go to the academy for the exam. He left the training grounds and headed down the main street of Konoha, keeping his gaze down so he didn't have to deal with the villagers' hate ones. I wonder who I'll be teamed up with. I don't know anyone all that well, but it would be nice to be paired up with that Shikamaru kid. He might be unbearably lazy, but his decision-making would be unparalleled in a fight. Maybe that Hyuga girl, I think her name is Hinata. She'd be a good teammate with that Byakugan. When Naruto decided to pay attention to what was around him, he was standing in his classroom at the Ninja Academy. He was surprised to see that he was the first there. He even beat Iruka. He simply shrugged and took a seat in that far back corner. He took out one of kunai and began to twirl it with his fingers. His focus on his activity was broken when Iruka, the class instructor, had walked in and sat down at his desk. Nice for you to join us, Naruto. Naruto didn't feel the need to respond to the Chunin instructor's jab at the boy's attendance. He knew what he was capable of and it was far beyond what Iruka had taught the rest of the class. He went back to focusing on the twirling of his kunai between his fingers until his focus was broken once more when a certain pink-haired girl walked into the room, following the heart-throb of the class Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto didn't understand why all the girls threw themselves at the Uchiha. It was annoying and, honestly, stalkerish. The blonde wasn't sure if he should feel bad for the Uchiha or envy him for the attention. Naruto seemed to have been focusing on Sakura longer than he thought he was because he didn't notice Sasuke was now standing in front of him. Can I help you, Sasuke? Why are you here, Uzumaki? You haven't been to class in almost a month, not to mention the countless days you missed beforehand. Naruto held a blank stare. Graduating is solely based on the results of the final exam. Read the handbook. Why do you even care? Miss me beating you in our sparring matches? Sasuke's smirk quickly disappeared and was replaced with a scowl. You wanna go again, Uzumaki? It's been a while since our last match and I've gotten stronger since then. All the Sasuke Fangirl Club, as Naruto called them, cheered in response to Sasuke's challenge. Naruto rolled his eyes as he continued to focus on his kunai. Don't flatter yourself, Sasuke. Awaken your Sharingan and we'll see how you stand against me. The spiky-haired blonde expected Sasuke to lash out against him for even mentioning the Sharingan like that. He knew it was probably a testy subject because of what his older brother, Itachi, did. Sasuke and Itachi were the sole surviving members of the Uchiha clan because Itachi had gone insane and killed them all, leaving only Sasuke alive on a whim. Naruto had his own thoughts about the Uchiha massacre but thought best to not dwell on those later. Sasuke huffed and held a cocky smirk. You are absolutely right, Naruto. When I do awaken my Sharingan, I'll be more than strong enough to take you on. Naruto caught his own kunai and finally looked at Sasuke. He could see the confidence behind them. It made the blonde smirk himself. He had always wanted to see how well he'd fare against the Sharingan. Sasuke, sit down. Iruka called out. The rest of class had been waiting for the two to finish before they could start, and it seemed Iruka was tired of waiting. We're about to begin the final exam for graduation. As some of you may have noticed, our part-time student, Naruto Uzumaki, will be joining us. How is that fair? He never comes to class. Naruto glanced over and noticed a bright blonde-haired girl. He had trouble placing the name for a moment before it clicked. Ino Yamanaka. He had no special feelings for this girl and only remembered her name because she was close to Sakura, even though they seemed to utterly hate each other, and was part of that Sasuke Fangirl Club. Naruto thought best to not say anything and let Iruka respond for him. Well, Ino, when Naruto isn't in class he trains by himself with Lord Hokage's supervision. So, it would be unfair to not allow him to take the exam. Another student decided to make his grievances known. What do you mean, with Lord Hokage's supervision? You're saying Naruto's been trained by the Sandaime? Naruto decided to answer this one before Iruka could divulge his training secrets. What I do outside of class is none of your concern. Now, if you'll all shut up, I'd like to get this pointless exam over with. Then why don't you go first, Naruto? Iruka questioned. Since you seem to think this exam will be easy. Naruto had no problem with that. The quicker he passed this exam the better. He simply stood from his spot and followed the Chunin instructor into the back room. Next day, Naruto was back in the same spot he was in the day prior. The only difference was that Naruto had a Konoha headband tied around his head. As the blonde expected, the graduation exam was beyond easy. A kunai throw that only needed 2 out of 3 in the bullseye to pass, AD rank genjutsu that had to be placed over the other instructor, and to create a simple bushin. Not even a kage bushin for that matter. How that proved that someone was capable of being a ninja was beyond Naruto's understanding. Naruto seemed to be too lost in thought to notice that the class had been filled. Maybe he needed to stop zoning out so much. Team 7 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki. There was a quick lash out of anger. How am I stuck on a team with that loser? Sasuke yelled out. We're freaking super team. That's not fair to everyone else. Ino yelled out in like fashion. Iruka was surprised. He was expecting Naruto to be the one to express his anger and disinterest for his team selection, but he stayed quiet. It seemed Naruto was content with the team he was placed with, or simply didn't care. Ino, Sasuke, take your seats please. Thank you. To answer your questions, the teams had to be balanced and the only fair way to do that is by test scores. Sasuke, you are at the top of the class. Sakura is around the middle. And Naruto is considered the dead last, despite having the only perfect on the graduation exam. Sakura raised her hand before speaking. If Naruto had the only perfect on the exam, how is he considered last in the class? All of you have your homework and test scores from your time in the academy. Since Naruto never came to class, he doesn't have the scores like the rest of you do to support him. Both seemed satisfied with that answer, but that didn't mean they liked it. Sasuke was still very mixed on how he felt about being paired up with Naruto. I hate this. How could I be put the same team as that loser? But, then again, I could use him to train. I wish I were lying, but he is leagues ahead of me. Since he's on my team, I'll be able to surpass him and kick his in spars all damn day. A small smirk spread across Sasuke's face as he thought about this. Sakura had no idea what to make of her team. She was absolutely thrilled about having her heartthrob Sasuke on the same team as her. It was the other new teammate that puzzled her. She had seen him around the village by himself, and every time she would always hear the same word being murmured. Demon. Sakura was never sure why, but her parents would always tell her to stay away from that boy every time they would come across him. She never understood why. He didn't bother anyone or cause any trouble. But she didn't want to upset her parents, so Sakura never questioned what her parents told her what to do. Naruto really didn't care one way or another about who his team members were. Sure, he wasn't completely thrilled about being put on the same team as Sasuke. He, honestly, should have expected it because he already knew he was at the bottom of the class, test-wise that is, and the teams needed to be evened out so that everyone has a fair chance. But Sakura was placed on the same team, so Naruto thought it wasn't the worst team choice for him. It would be easier that way. We need to watch out for that team. We can't get on their bad side. Yeah, I know. That blonde kid is nothing to mess with, and neither is Sasuke. Naruto couldn't help but smirk when he overheard the private conversation between the two students in front of him. It was nice to hear praise for once. Each of the members of Team 7 were so caught up in their own thoughts about their team selection for such a long time that by the time they came out of their own thoughts, everyone else had left with their Jonin sensei. Sakura was the first to notice they were the only team left to be picked up by their sensei. Where is our sensei? Shouldn't he be here by now? She questioned out loud. Neither of her teammates showed no indication of responding. Sakura sighed. I hope Kakashi-sensei isn't always this late. Naruto's attention snapped to full when the Pinkett spoke. That name sparked the memory of the day that Jiraiya had left him. The day that everything changed. This Kakashi was the Anbu that escorted him from the hospital to the Hokage's office. While he didn't pay any mind to it at the time, the man had a sense of familiarity to Naruto. Why, or even how, the blonde hadn't the slightest clue. Suddenly the sliding door opened and stepped in as a bored-looking man wearing the typical shinobi pants, with the blue long-sleeve shinobi shirt and green vest. The man had his headband placed over his left eye and his spiky gray hair seemed to defy gravity. The most interesting part about the man was that a mask covered half his face. The man didn't look at his students because he was too involved with the book he was reading. Ika Ika Paradise. Naruto groaned when he saw that book. You must Team 7. Be on the roof in 5 minutes. With that, the man left. Kakashi glanced up from his book and was pleased to see that his new students were standing around him. Take a seat and we will begin. Sakura and Sasuke did just that and sat on the small set of stairs, across from their sensei who was leaning against a railing, while Naruto decided to remain standing just off to the right of Sakura's right shoulder. Kakashi took note of this, realizing that Naruto was standing there for protection and not luxury. Sakura didn't seem to notice, or it simply didn't bother her. The silver-haired Jonin took in what his students were wearing, seeing if they would be easily noticed in concealment. The girl was wearing a red kippou dress, with dark green bike shorts underneath, blue shinobi sandals. Practical for movement and decent in cover, her hair was more of a problem. The Uchiha wore a navy blue short-sleeved high-collared shirt with white shorts and white arm warmers and blue shinobi sandals. A better choice, blends in easy. The only one standing, the blonde, was wearing an unzipped orange and blue jacket, with a white collar, with a mesh undershirt armor, a pair of black pants and sandals. All three had kunai holsters on their preferred side with white bandages wrapped as well. The black was a perfect choice, but the orange jacket stuck out as much as the blonde hair. Okay, we are going to start off by introducing ourselves. Sakura raised her hand. Kakashi motioned his head to let the girl know to ask her question. What kind of stuff do you want to know, sensei? Just your likes, dislikes, hobbies, your dreams, stuff of that nature. And you don't have to raise your hand to talk, this isn't the classroom anymore. Why don't you start? Sakura nodded and thought for a moment before speaking. My name is Sakura Haruno. I have someone I like. She continuously glanced over to Sasuke as her cheeks flushed the same color as her red kippou dress. My dream is to. She glanced at Sasuke once more before she squealed in delight at her own thoughts. Kakashi inwardly groaned as he rubbed the back of his neck. Girls these days are more interested in love than anything else. What do you hate? Sakura hummed for a second before she answered. I don't hate anything, to be honest. Kakashi nodded and looked to the black-haired Uchiha next to her. You go. Sasuke didn't hesitate as interlocked his fingers in front of his face and rested his elbows on his knees. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. There are a lot of things I hate, and not too many things I like or enjoy. The word, dream, means nothing to me. I have but two ambitions. The revival of my clan and to kill a certain man. Kakashi was not shocked by this response. He fully expected this type of answer from someone who witnessed the murder of his entire clan by his older brother. His one visible eye finally fell onto Naruto. Your last, Blondie. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I guess you could say the one thing I like is ramen. My hobby is training every day. My dislikes, his mind flashed a memory of Jiraiya, betrayal. My goal is to be the strongest and prove this village they were wrong. Kakashi was not surprised by this response either. He knew of the problems that Naruto had faced when Lord Jiraiya decided to leave Naruto in the village unexpectedly. It may have been for a mission, but that didn't mean Kakashi agreed with the Sanin's decision to leave without an explanation. There was a lot of work to be done before this team would be able to function properly. Okay, if that's everything, then. Hold on, Naruto suddenly spoke up, we don't know anything about you. Ah, well, my name is Kakashi Hatake, I have no intention of telling you my likes or dislikes. As for my dream, I have a few hobbies. His voice trailed off as he began to read his book once more. While the two-seated genin held deadpanned expressions, Naruto wasn't willing to let the man off that easy. Well, we know you like to read porn in public. Kakashi stopped reading and glanced up at the boy, ignoring Sakura's eye twitching and Sasuke's raised eyebrow. You know, Naruto, I'm not the only one here that's being a little misleading. Naruto arched his brow. What are you talking about? Oh, just a tale I heard from a perverted old man whose favorite number was 9. Naruto's shock was visible while both Sakura and Sasuke stayed confused at their sensei's statement. Kakashi worried that he may have hit a nerve by hinting at the Kyuubi, but he also wanted to confirm if Naruto knew about the beast within him or not. His worries were relived when he heard a small scoff from Naruto, who held a small smirk. Fair play, Kakashi-sensei. You, 1. Me, 0. Naruto's response only raised further questions about him. Kakashi wished he could ask them but knew this was not the time, nor in the right company, to do so. The boy would have to come to him on his own about his own concerns about the best before Kakashi could ask his. To continue what I was saying earlier, if that's everything then we'll head over to the training grounds. Sasuke stared at the Jonin confusingly as he stood up. Training grounds. We're starting training already. Kakashi shook his head. No, not really, this is a survival test. If you pass then you become my students, therefore genin. But if you fail then it's back to the academy for another year. All three were shocked, but Sakura was the loudest about it. We go back if we fail. We pass the graduation exam. Kakashi simply chuckled as he placed his book away in his back pouch. That was the knowledge portion of the exam. It's important but not the most vital. What do you mean? Sasuke questioned. Think about it like this. If you've only read a book on how to disarm a timed explosive tag, would it be smart to throw yourself into a life or death situation where time is your greatest enemy and a single mistake will cost your life? No. It's better to practice the techniques and go through scenarios so that you have some type of experience when you must deal with the situation. Knowing how to do something then actually having to do it are completely different. I, as your sensei, have to make sure you can handle yourselves in dangerous situations. The three students nodded at Kakashi's explanation for behind the test as they entered the training grounds. Kakashi stood in front of his possible students and pulled out 2 small bells from his pocket. The goal of this test is quite simple. All you have to do is take these bells from me before sundown. If you don't then you fail. Simple, right? Naruto slammed fist as he let his excitement show. Finally. I was starting to wonder if that boring exam was it. Sakura stepped forward. Why are there 2 bells if there's 3 of us? Kakashi smiled innocently. That's because one of you will fail, only 2 of you can pass. Naruto's excitement was replaced with confusion as he stared at the gray-haired man. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How can only 2 of us pass when a standard team consists of 1 sensei and 3 genin? There has to be a point to this then, it can't be as simple as he says. We'd just turn on each other and fight him by yourselves to get the bells. It would be easier to work Toget. Naruto's eyes shot wide open as the realization hit him. That's it. He wants us to turn against each other. The actual point to this test is teamwork and come together as a unit. We might actually pull off a victory if we do this right. Kakashi saw the change in expression on Naruto. What's that smirk for? Sasuke and Sakura snapped out of their own thoughts and both glanced at Naruto. Nothing really. Just figuring out the secret to your test and how all 3 of us are going to pass. The blonde's teammates' eyes went wide as they stared at him in shock. Kakashi chuckled in slight amusement. Is that so? Then what is the secret to my test? Naruto's smirk never left his features as he crossed his arms. You'll see. Kakashi tied the 2 bells to one of his belt loops as he jumped back, towards the middle of the training grounds. He took out his perverted orange book and began to read it. Begin. The young blonde stayed put in the clearing while his 2 teammates jumped away into the trees that surrounded the training grounds. He knew that if he wanted to pass this test then he'd have to team up with Sakura and Sasuke. He didn't a major issue with teaming up with them, but he felt like he needed to try and fight his sensei one-on-one. He thought it would be fair since he was missing out on training for the day. Despite Sasuke's protest, Sakura followed him into his hiding spot. Why she couldn't just leave him alone and try to think for herself was beyond him. But now was not the time to think about that. Sasuke was more interested on thinking how he was going to use this test to show up Naruto. He would get those bells without Naruto and Sakura's help and prove that he is the strongest in the team. Sakura's mind was working on overdrive as she tried to figure out a way to have her and Sasuke pass the test. She knew she had no chance of getting the bells by herself, that's why she decided to follow Sasuke and help him come up with a plan. It's not that she didn't want Naruto to pass, she just preferred it be her and Sasuke who pass. But Naruto did say he knew how all three of them could pass. Sasuke, let's go find Naruto. He said he had a plan for all of us to pass. Sasuke's eye twitched. We don't need that doby. If he can think of a plan, then there's no way I can't. Sakura nodded in agreement with her crush, small smile adoring her features. I know you think of something, Sasuke. Their attention was suddenly drawn back to the clearing where they saw Naruto still standing where they had left him. Kakashi seemed to have noticed but showed no indication that he has. Both Sakura and Sasuke were shocked to see him still there. What in the world is he doing? The girl asked. No idea. Kakashi knew that Naruto hadn't left the area and was watching him intently. There was no sign in Naruto's body language that he was about to attack or even move towards him. Kakashi raised his visible eyebrow what the boy's intentions could be because Naruto was by far the strongest member of the team and could take the bells by himself, if Kakashi made the mistake of underestimating the boy. Naruto was disturbingly strong for his age. From the personal files that the Sandaime gave Kakashi to study from to watching the blonde train, Kakashi was very impressed by the boy's resume. The file from the third stated that Naruto knew basic jutsu for every chakra nature, was proficient in using the Kage Bushin no Jutsu, and, apparently, had an uncommon ability to use Fuinjutsu quite easily. And Kakashi was confident in the fact that wasn't all Naruto knew. He did spend the first 6 years of his life traveling with Jiraiya, whether he liked to admit it or not. So, Naruto, care to explain how being here and not with your teammates will pass you all? Naruto's smirk never faded. This has nothing to do with passing. It's just I normally train for most of the day and this little test is cutting into that. I thought seeing how I do against a Jonin would be a good trade-off. Especially since it'll be against the copycat ninja. So, you've heard of my nickname. You're full of surprises, Naruto. Kakashi let a small chuckle escape as he placed his book back in his pouch. I don't mind a quick sparring match. You must be serious about this since you're putting that smut away. Kakashi sighed. I wouldn't be where I am because I underestimated my opponents. I'm not going to make that mistake with you. And I figured you'd have more appreciation for masterpieces. Naruto groaned and rolled his eyes. They are just his late-night fantasies, nothing masterful about it. Kakashi shook his head. The younger generation will never appreciate a good book. Naruto was done talking and charged at Kakashi, vanishing from man's sight. The Jonin blocked the kick from his right as he already prepared to block the punch to his stomach. He's faster than I expected. Those must be chakra weights on his ankles. But to move at this speed with them on, how fast can he be without them? Kakashi watched intently as he continued to block repeated kicks and punches from the blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto's taijutsu was better than what Kakashi thought as well. What else was this young boy capable of? Kakashi wasn't the only one impressed with Naruto, both Sakura and Sasuke were as well. Sasuke knew firsthand how good Naruto was in battle. He was his main sparring opponent in the academy after all, but to watch him fight was something else entirely. Naruto's movements were swift and precise, there was no wasted energy. It was painfully obvious that Naruto was very disciplined in his training. Sakura was in the same boat as Sasuke. She had watched Naruto go up against Sasuke time after time, but never really paid much attention to Naruto's movements in battle. His brawler type style was uncommon but seemed to be highly effective. His strong kicks and punches would leave bruises easily, and his quick reaction time was, by far, ahead of anyone in their age group. Sakura hoped that Naruto's strength would rub off on her so she could impress the likes of Sasuke. Naruto flipped into the air, using Kakashi's latest block as his springboard, and went through a series of hand signs. Futon. Sunabakori. Wind style. Dust storm. Naruto exhaled a massive dust cloud from his mouth and it covered the entire field, including the surrounding trees. Kakashi's vision was completely blocked by the thick dust, he couldn't see a mere 2 inches in front of him. He resorted to using his sense of smell and hearing to protect his bells. Both Sakura and Sasuke covered their eyes so the dust wouldn't get in them and cause future problems. Suddenly, they were grabbed from behind and pulled out from their hiding spots and brought out of the cloud of dust. Once their eyes readjusted, they were surprised to see 2 Narutos. What the hell, Naruto? Sakura immediately shouted. You could have just told us to follow you and not grab us like that. You wouldn't have been able to follow me in that thick of dust. Even Kakashi-sensei is having a hard time with it. One of the Narutos said. Sasuke stood up and dusted himself off, raising an eyebrow at the blonde's actions. Sakura did the same and voiced her questions. What are we doing out here, Naruto? And what's your plan? The other Naruto moved his neck and a loud pop followed. Sasuke, I need to head back and help the real me fight off Kakashi-sensei. Once that dust cloud disappears, I don't think he'll very happy. And why is that? You seem doing just fine against him. Sasuke questioned. The clone reached into his pocket and pulled out the orange book that the Jonin was reading from earlier. He probably won't like me having his favorite book. Besides, the whole point to this test to work as a team. At this, both Sasuke and Sakura eyes shot open as everything made sense. While you and boss are dealing with sensei, Sakura will be the one to take the bells. How am I going to do that? The pink kid questioned. The clone held up the book. With this, he handed it to Sakura. You are going to threaten to destroy the book and demand he hand over the bells to save it. That seems a bit harsh. Sakura responded. The clone shrugged. It's what he gets for reading that smut in the first place. Sasuke caught something in the clone's tone. You seem a bit hostile towards a book. What? Don't like to read? The clone ignored the insult as he looked towards the clearing. He could see the cloud of dust starting to disappear. It's not the book. Go. The dust is being carried away by the wind. The 2 clones burst into clouds of white smoke while the 2 rushed to the clearing. The real Naruto, who was hiding in the dissipating cloud of dust, felt a small headache suddenly wash over him. The memories of what the clones did with Sakura and Sasuke filled his brain and Naruto smirked once more. Kakashi was finally starting to see and, soon enough, all the dust in the air had completely been blown away by the wind. He was surprised to see that Naruto was no longer alone, standing next to him was Sasuke. They were both in a battle stance. Kakashi had little time to react to Naruto and Sasuke's joint attack. They both went at him with opposing attacks. Sasuke would send a kick and Naruto would send a punch. And vice versa. Kakashi was impressed once more. He was pleased to see that they could put aside their differences for a common goal. Now if they could incorporate the female member of their team then. Sakura. Where is she? A sudden wave of worry came over the famed copycat shinobi as he tried to sense the young girl's chakra, but he couldn't find her. He noted that Sakura would be a natural at chakra control because she was hiding her chakra signature very well. Naruto and Sasuke's dual attack was quickly countered when Kakashi used Sasuke's momentum to throw him into Naruto, giving Kakashi the breather he needed to search for Sakura. He didn't have to look very far because she was standing out in the open. She seemed to be hiding something behind her back. Say Kakashi-sensei, how about a trade? Kakashi raised his eyebrow. A trade? Sakura removed her hands from behind her back and held Kakashi's book with both hands, near her chest. You hand over the bells and I won't destroy your book. The innocence in Sakura's voice told Kakashi that the pink kid wasn't kidding. True panic and fear fell upon the Jonin. Okay. Okay. He took the bells off his belt loop and held them out. Deal. Deal. Sakura smiled triumphantly as she skipped over to her sensei and took the bells in her hands and handed over the orange book. All three students noticed that their teacher breathed a heavy sigh of relief when that book was in his hands, like some type of security blanket. I must say, I'm impressed, you three. Kakashi said when he made his way over to his students. Whose plan was it to use my precious book against me? Naruto's. Sakura couldn't stop smiling as she answered. Kakashi should have figured that one. His gaze moved to the blonde as he held on of the two bells in his hand. Dislike my taste in literature that much you'd threaten it just to pass the test. Naruto shrugged, placing the bell in his pocket. Kakashi. 1. Me. 1. Kakashi chuckled slightly. Well played, Naruto. You three did very well. Not only did you figure out the true purpose for this test by yourselves, you figured out a weakness of mine and exploited it. You three did well. Congratulations, you pass. Sakura's wide grin somehow became even wider as both Naruto and Sasuke smirked in triumph. They were now official shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. And unknown to them, the first to pass the bell test. Good job, you guys, we are now officially Team 7. Our first mission is tomorrow. Meet here at 7 tomorrow morning. 2 months later. Naruto and the rest of Team 7 couldn't believe this was the third time this week that the same damn cat had run away from its owner. It was also the 8th time this month as well. Naruto knew he wasn't the only one considered skinning the cat alive as a way of showing Madame Shijimi, the fire daimyo's wife, that you can't bear hug an animal into loving you. Team 7 watched the fire daimyo's wife pay for her third mission this week, then leave the room behind them, leaving only the team and the Hokage in the room. Good work, Team 7. The Hokage said. Your 7th D rank mission this week and 20th one this month. Your team is quite impressive, Kakashi. Kakashi bowed slightly. Thank you, Lord Hokage. Sarutobi was going through some papers on his desk, seemingly searching for something. Kakashi knew that the Hokage was looking for another D rank mission to give his team. He didn't mind that, but the gray-haired Jonin felt that his team was ready to take the next step. Lord Third, I believe my team is ready for the next level. Sarutobi stopped rummaging through his papers and smiled at one of most trusted shinobi. He picked up another piece of paper he had set aside earlier. You think they're ready? Kakashi didn't say anything but nodded. That carried all the words he wanted to say. At your request, I do have C-rank escort mission to the Land of Waves. Kakashi looked over his shoulder to his team. Any objections? Sakura was nodding excitingly, Sasuke was smirking, and Naruto slammed his fist into his hand and held a toothy grin. Sarutobi liked to see Naruto expressing himself like he was. It was a nice change of pace for the elderly man. We'll take it, Lord Hokage. Sarutobi nodded in recognition for the up-and-coming team of genin and looked towards the door of his office. Hey, you can come in now. He called out. The team's attention was shifted to the door as it was opened by an elderly man, holding a nearly empty bottle of sake, who stumbled into the room. The man glanced over the young teens and their teacher before looking at the Hokage in mild disinterest. What the hell, Mr. Hokage? These are kids, not ninja. How am I supposed to be safe with damn kids protecting me? The short one with the angry-looking face looks too stupid to be a ninja. Naruto glared daggers at the older man. It was no secret that he was talking about him. Sasuke was smirking and Sakura couldn't help but giggle at the insult. Sarutobi, however, wasn't going to let this client insult his shinobi. If you don't like the team selection I have for you, you can take your business elsewhere, Tazuna. I wouldn't have given them this mission if my confidence was lacking in them. It is my firm belief that you will be safe in their hands. Tazuna stopped his stumbling around and thought about the Hokage's words. If the man that ran the village had such confidence in a bunch of kids, what did he have to say against that? The man let out a laugh. Okay, I was too quick to judge you all. I'm sorry for that. I'm the super bridge builder expert, Tazuna. I would be honored if you'd take on my request. After receiving the actual briefing for the mission, Team 7 and Tazuna decided to head out of the village the following morning to give them some rest before the mission. And to pack and spend time with family. Well, that was mostly for Sakura because her two male teammates didn't have any family to go home to. With Naruto had been lacking on his training as of late because multiple D-rank missions could be done in a single day. Most days, Team 7 would complete 3 to 4 missions a day. That really had been cutting into Naruto's training time. He needed to let loose some pent-up frustrations of the past few months. The young blonde dispatched a squad of 10 clones to attack him, working on his taijutsu and physical prowess, while another set of clones studied scrolls and practiced the jutsus he already knew. This was the blonde's release for anger, frustration, or anything else really. Training was the boy knew. His daily routine revolved around it. Naruto dispelled the final clone with a hard kick to its head. He breathed in and out heavily. He ran his hand through his sweaty hair to move it out of his vision. Blood was mixed in with his sally sweat. I told those clones to come at me with the intent to kill. I didn't even notice this. It wasn't a large amount of blood but a decent amount to cause some mild concern. I can't let something like this happen again. I have to get stronger. The image of his long-gone caretaker suddenly came into his mind and a surge of energy surged through his body. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Instantly, 30 more clones came into existence in plumes of smoke. Naruto eyed them all as he cracked his knuckles by simply making a pair of fists. Again, he cried out as he charged head-on into the crowd. With Sasuke, the black-haired Uchiha boy was deep in the woods that laid inside village walls. There was battle-worn target with 7 kunai and 13 shurikens sticking out of it, all thrown with deadly precision. Sasuke had taken a break from his physical training, which consisted of hitting a tree until he went numb from the pain. Looking at the target always brought up memories of the days where he trained with his older brother, Itachi. Back then, his only concern was making sure he actually hit the target instead of trying to aim for the bullseye. Then, Sasuke just wanted Itachi to be proud of his skills so that their father would be impressed too. Now, Itachi was the sole reason for Sasuke to keep going. The young Avenger would not stop or rest until Itachi Uchiha lay dead at his feet. With Sakura had been growing more nervous throughout the rest of the day and into the night. After she was finally able to stop and think about the possible outcomes of leaving the safety of the village for the first time, both excited and terrified the young Kunoichi. She was excited to what the world was like outside Konoha, but Sakura was not stupid nor naive. She knew there were bandits that preyed on the weak and missing shinobi that hated the great nations and were far stronger than her. Some of those worries were laid to rest because of her teammates and Jonin-sensei. Sakura knew Kakashi would be there and would protect them if things became out of hand and the genin couldn't handle them. She even believed Sasuke could do the same if Kakashi was readily available to help. But then there was her other male teammate, Naruto. She hadn't really given it much thought since becoming a team, but there were some things about him that made the Pinkett question. One thing about Naruto that Sakura was confused about was that there was a sense of familiarity, like she had met him before. When she actually thought about it, Sakura had never seen Naruto before the academy. It was like he just popped into existence out of thin air. Another thing Sakura noticed about her blonde teammate was that whenever she'd see him around the village, during their academy days and even today, there was a distinct feeling in the air that emitted from the villagers. She wasn't sure what that feeling was. The best word she could think of to describe it was fear. But she never dwelled on this for a long period of time. Her mom and dad would always tell her to leave that boy alone. Sakura shrugged to herself and covered herself with her sheets as she shifted to get comfortable. A few minutes passed before the young girl was asleep.